time to sharpen the blade. Well, I want you to see how fine the sawdust is. That's what it looks like if your saw is dull. We're going to sharpen our chainsaw today. I want to show you some things that you got to know about your saw. We've got different pieces of your chainsaw chain. I keep saying blade, but it's a chain. We got different pieces of this chain, and what we're going to do is we're going to identify the pieces for you real quick. This whole little mechanism right here is called your cutter. It's held to your chain by rivets. Okay, these are your rivets. There's distinct parts to your cutter, and these are what cut the log, and these are what we're going to sharpen in this video. Okay, so we've got our top tooth. We have this little divot here in the bottom, which is called our gullet. We have this gauge right here that needs to be a little bit lower than your tooth so it'll cut. And some people call this a raker, but this is a gauge. And then we have the toe of the cutter, and we have the heel of the cutter. We have our drive link. These drive links are what hold our chain together. We're going to sharpen the tooth. This is your top tooth. This area right here, you might be able to see it better on this one. This is your side tooth right in here. This is called a chisel chain. These are your drive links that ride along the groove of your chain, and you don't want these to get too loose. This one's loose, we're going to tighten it. You don't want it to get too loose because it'll come up over and it'll jump off the bar. So what we're going to do is we're going to end up tightening that one, but first, before we do, we're going to sharpen this blade. Now this type of cutter is called a chisel cutter because it's flat on the top. It's got a defined corner, and this one will take off more meat than your other type of cutters that are more rounded. This one will really chew into the log. You'll start producing a lot of sawdust and not chips, and that is when you want to sharpen your chain. A lot of people say, well, I'm going to sharpen my chain after every 2 tanks of gas. Well, that's maybe a good rule of thumb. It probably depends on the type of wood you're cutting. Cutting cedar trees, you're going to sharpen your chain a lot more often. We're going to show you a few techniques on how to sharpen your chain. All right, put my gloves on. Now, sharpening a chain is usually a 2-stage process. If you haven't used your saw for a while, your file will probably have a lot of rust. Take your little wire brush, and really clean off your chisel. You want your grooves in your chisel to take off as much meat with as little effort as possible. Knock that out and get your grooves clean. It's still going to look rusty, but it's going to have a little bit more depth to your grooves. So now you can really work it. If your files get a lot of oil on them, you would think that they would cut better, but they gum up really quick. So try to keep your files rust free, but also try to keep your files from collecting a lot of oil on them so that the shavings don't pile up in your little grooves. This is a 3/16 round file. There's 2 sides to a saw. Some go this way and then some go this way. Grab my blade, and I like to hold it down on something solid, a piece of wood or the ground or whatever. And then I'm going to take my file and I'm going to stick it right here in the round part of my cutter. And I'm going to only go one direction. I'm going to twist my file as I go. Twist it as you go. What you're trying to do is you're trying to sharpen that, and you'll finally see how it continues to grab. Once it stops grabbing, then you'll know it's ready to go. It's sharp. Okay, you can see how it's really shiny. It's got a lot of bite to it. Okay, the top of the cutter and the side of the cutter are really sharp. Now we have to attack this depth gauge, because if this sticks up above your tooth, you're going to do no good at all. This depth gauge is one of those, it's sort of a pain in the rear. It's a 2-step process. But the depth gauge, what you do is you hold it down, and you don't want to touch your file point with your flat file. what you're gonna do is, I always like to hold my thumb to protect the corner of that tooth, the top cutter, and I want to drag my flat file over my depth gauge, or what some people might call a raker. All I'm doing is I'm taking it down just a hair below that tooth. I don't know if you can see that on the video or not, but now you can see I've filed down my depth gauge. I've sharpened my side cutter and my top cutter, and this one is ready to go. Now, I'm gonna skip one because that one you have to go from the other angle. I'm gonna grab the next one, and I'm gonna grab my round file, and I'm gonna do the same thing. A lot of times you'll find that your depth gauge is sticking up too high, and when you knock it down, your saw will cut really well. Okay, that one's good. I've got it sharp. Now I'm gonna protect that tooth with my glove, and I'm gonna run my flat file over my raker or my depth gauge. And I can look at the side profile, and I can see that that is a hair below this. So now that one's sharp. And I keep doing that over and over and over and over. But let me show you what I've seen some people do. And you can buy a tool for this, but you don't have to go out and buy one of these little tools. You can take your cordless drill, and you can put your round file in your cordless drill. This will save you a little elbow work. And you come to the next one, slide it in, and then that saves you a little bit of elbow grease. You can hit that side tooth right there, and you can hit that top tooth with your round file in a drill. That may help you out if you want to do it that way, but you still will have to sharpen that raker or that depth gauge. You'll have to lower that depth gauge on your chain so that this tooth can grab. That's another option. But let me show you something you want to use. Now, a friend of mine told me that I need to get one of these. These are made by Stihl. I've got a Stihl saw. They're made by Stihl. You get them that fit your size chain. And what they do is they are a one-step process. And that one-step process takes out all the problem with it all at once. And you see they have arrows on them. You see they have arrows. They have gauges so that you know the angle at which you need to hold it. This needs to be parallel with your bar. I'm going to draw these out so you can see them. Here's my chainsaw. Here's the way this needs to be positioned. And it needs to run parallel. This side right here needs to run parallel with your bar. Now let me show you what I'm talking about. So I take my chain, I lay it in the tooth, and I'm going to place it parallel. As you can see, it's got a flat file and the round files already built in. Okay? So what you're doing is you're sharpening the top tooth, the side tooth, and you're lowering the raker or the depth gauge all at the same time. So I'm going to keep doing this one. Just make sure that this is parallel with your bar so that you get the right angle on your tooth. You go to the next one. There's that one. I'm gonna go all the way around. Okay, I've been all the way around. All of those are very sharp. I'm gonna flip my saw around and I'm gonna work the other side. I want to show you the arrow. Maybe it'll show up better on camera this way. And this is the direction I've got to push it. You're only pushing it one direction. Okay, now we're gonna go test it. Now we're blowing chips, and that's how you can tell if your chainsaw is cutting. Look how quick we went through half that log. There you go, guys. Now I need to have my nephew do a little splitting on Heim's how-tos. I highly recommend you get one of those Stihl 2-in-1 sharpening tools from Amazon. They're $20, $25, maybe $30, and they will save you time sharpening your chainsaw. So guys, if you're out here and you're using your chainsaw, I highly recommend that you pick up one of these 2-in-1 step sharpeners from a Stihl. It'll save you a lot of time and it'll save you a lot of chains. Don't have to buy them if you can sharpen them. Have a good day.